Hello, everyone, and welcome to Customer Experience Behind the Scenes. I'm your host, Carl Shreese, and it's a pleasure having you with us all today. Welcome to spring weather and hopefully soon to be summer weather. And for Michelle, you're going to be in really summer weather soon and fun in the sun days ahead. We have a great program in store for you today, but before we get going, I want to share a few things first. Number one, we hold these discussions around key customer experience topics monthly and always on the third Tuesday of every month. We began this series back in December of 2022. Has it been that long, Paulina? Wow.
Yes.
This is our 18th episode. And for any of you that may have missed a previous episode or weren't able to attend the whole thing, all prior episodes are recorded as we speak and available on the Question Pro website. So you just go to questionpro.com and then you scroll down to where it says Customer Experience Behind the Scenes, and you'll find all prior episodes there. So as far as for me, I manage a small consulting business and training business called Horizon CX, and we are a business partner with Question Pro. And our primary output or offering is an online instructor-led hands-on training course focused on the fundamentals of customer experience management that we call CX Pro. Customer experience is like many other disciplines, and it's built on a foundation of principles. And CX principles focus on helping instill customer-centric practices and behaviors that enable businesses to achieve their objectives and desired business outcomes. The CX Pro program helps both individuals and organizations learn to master the basics of CX through hands-on training. And it concludes with an exam that upon passage earns everyone their CX Pro certification, recognizing their knowledge and skills in the fundamentals of CX. And just for numbers, statistics purposes here, we now have over 160 folks who have been trained and certified as a CX Pro. Yahoo! These are really key skills to master within customer experience management, and they complement the technology. So together that helps create those desired business outcomes. And that includes Question Pro's technologies and solutions. However, as we all know, technology by itself won't get you there. You can know the technology, how the technology works, that's one thing. But knowing how to apply that technology and leverage it is another, and that's the goal of the CX Pro program. Learning how to work with the principles and processes of CX to leverage the technology. Also, there's a companion book that is to the course called CX Pro, a practical guide for the new customer experience manager. And Paulina will talk about that in a little bit. Someone on this session today will have an opportunity to perhaps win one of those books. It is available on Barnes & Noble and Amazon and other leading book sources. And I'm happy to say, or happy to add to that a second book will be coming out entitled CX Pro Beyond the Basics, Advanced Insights for Customer Experience Professionals. Will be coming out later this year, so be on the lookout for that. And one of the gentlemen that's on this video here today, Scott Gilby, is one of the 16 authors in that book. So thank you, Scott. This monthly discussion forum is here to help you learn and advance in your own career or your own CX career. And so I encourage you to engage and ask questions by submitting them within the chat or within that QR code that you see coming up on your screen right now. And because we always try to make these sessions interactive. So the more questions you have for us, the better off it's going to be for you. So I would like to turn the program over momentarily here to Mr. Nick McFarland, who's going to give us a quick introduction to Question Pro.
Thank you, Carl. So, hi, everyone. Question Pro is a global experience management platform vendor. So I run our CX team in Europe out of London, and we have powerful and easy to use solutions across market research, customer experience, and employee experience. What I particularly like about our CX platform is that we are the only solution in the market to have fully integrated all three components of the CX ecosystem. So customer journey mapping, surveys, data collection, voice of the customer, and then a closed loop and outer loop framework to track and manage your actions. So it's a really thoughtful end-to-end platform that helps you make the most of your customer experience efforts. we also believe in offering you really strong support as well as local CX expert advice. So you can find out more about what we do at questionpro.com. Thank you, Carl.
Well, thank you, Nick, for that. Thank you very much. And as we do in every episode, before we get going here, we run a poll that's related to the topic of the day, which is about how those of us in CX or CX practitioners can recognize the early warning signs of programs that may be at risk and how to prevent that, how to intervene and prevent that, and ensure that your initiatives continue to get supported. So, Paulina, can we run that? Thank you. Here we go.
Absolutely. Go, and I'll be posting on the comments as well in case you guys don't have for scanning the QR code, the URL as well. So here you go.
I'm using my cell phone to do the QR code to go in.
Like we need some Jeopardy music, right?
Yeah, no, here I could have got my ukulele and played a tune here. Thanks for that. That was a good suggestion, Michelle. Maybe next time I will do that.
Yeah, no, for next time.
Oh, they do. I think there is music. Here we
There
go.
is rock feeding the dogs. I don't know what's that. A ver.
That's good.
Feeding the dogs. I don't know why is that.
There you go, Carl.
That sounds good.
Okay. Join. Okay. Just joining.
It's like the suspense is killing me right now.
We're about
What are you
to
about to
start.
ask?
What the question is gonna be?
What is it?
What is it? Okay,
The
so
suspense. Yeah, the suspense.
should we give this a spin? Let's start. Okay, guys.
Yeah, let's give it a spin.
And the question is, what do you find most difficult when trying to keep a strong, relevant, and adaptable CX program? It says, A, identifying early signs of trouble or what? Or program risk. B, adapting quickly and effectively to changes in the market or customer behavior. C, we have so many options, different. Love it. Leveraging changes as an opportunity for growth and innovation. D, building and maintaining strong internal alliances and support. E, ensuring sustained executive buy-in and the strategic importance of the CX program. Or F, communicating and demonstrating the value of the CX program to the wider organization. What is all of them? No, I'm kidding. Well, the most difficult, yeah.
Interesting.
And the answers are coming in.
I'm going to go with.
They're streaming in.
Well, it's interesting because they're all important, right? What's the most challenging thing?
And here we can start seeing what is the 30% for adapting quickly and effectively to changes. 30% they're saying.
Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting. So agile. And agile.
Alliances, that's pretty good, strong too, right?
The alliance. Sustain executive buy-in. Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's good. I think we're good here. Yeah. Adapting quickly. Okay, that's really what we're going to be addressing here very shortly. So, with that, thank you, Paulina, and thank you everyone who participated in the poll. So, my special guest today is Michelle Pregman. Michelle is a transformational client experience leader focused on innovative strategies that drive revenue, mobilize cohesive teams, and deliver elevated customer experiences. Michelle has created profitable results in executive CX leadership positions for global iconic brands such as 7-Eleven, Citibank, Medallia, and Dell. She was named Top CX Professional in 2017 and again in 2021. IT Executive of the Year, 2017 CXPA Innovation Award winner, serves as co-MC in the Customer Centricity World Series Awards. Michelle is co-host of the Hard-Won Wisdom podcast and president of the Brave Advantage, where she partners with companies to craft unforgettable experiences that resonate. Michelle's passion lies in enhancing CX, activating high-performance teams, and harmonizing work-life dynamics. Michelle lives with her family in Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas. Michelle, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Carl. Pretty glad to be here.
Let's start with you giving us just a little more beyond that introduction. Maybe kind of what you're passionate about these days in the land of CX, where lots of things seem to be happening, both positive and otherwise.
Right. Honestly, if I were to pick one word, it would be transition. Like there's something that needs to change, and that can apply to both from a business perspective, where we are isn't working and we're trying to figure out how to evolve to keep up to the changing needs. It could be on a personal level in terms of career, work-life balance. I do a lot of coaching around that, leadership development as well. And I think that, the environment's changing, both how technology is playing a role in the way work is being done and how we see it changing in the future. And it's a matter of just being able to know, how do I know which direction to go? What does good look like for me, for my company, for my team? And then applying some of those, I'll say, structured problem solving methods, right? To kind of reverse engineer it and figure out what are the behaviors I need to implement today that are going to set me up for success to achieve that. Again, whether as a business, team, department, or on a personal level.
Yeah, that's a really key word, transition, because I mean, think about it. How many of us work from remote locations these days as opposed to in an office? I can't even remember what it was like to work in an office.
I know. But I realized how much I thrive on that. I was laughing. My kids told me the other day, they're like, Mom, you need to get back in for office time because you're driving us nuts. I've got whiteboards in every room. I want to collaborate. And while we can do that, virtually, you've got to be really intentional about the approaches that you use and figuring out what works so you can just stay energized and keep those ideas flowing.
Yeah. Think of how that works in the academic area. My wife is a professor, and she has been on campus, I think, twice in the last 2 years. Imagine that. All of her courses, all of her teachings are virtual. They're all online. It wasn't like that before COVID. And so
Yeah.
that created a huge transition or adjustment from the point of view of both students and professors in university. So
I think what's really cool is when you think about approaches that are sort of those hybrid where you can give people materials to look at their own pace, but being able to create small enough groups or interactive enough groups where you can pull everybody together to share, to ideate, to kind of elevate the thinking. So being a very good facilitator, and you think about how that applies to leading CX strategies, because 9 times out of 10, you don't own the budget, you don't own the business, you own influencing the organization to make decisions that are going to benefit customer employee experience along with financial outcomes, right? The business outcomes. So I think there's a lot of similarity between the role of that educator as well as the facilitator or the influencer.
yeah, true. So I want to start with a kind of bigger question, bigger picture question, if you will, around CX programs. And I reflect back on my years in corporate, especially my last 10 years, because those were formative years in the world of customer experience. I guess I was one of the luckier in that respect, because over a 10-year period, I got continual support from the organization, both from leadership and from other collaborators and influencers in the organization. In other words, nothing much really happened in 10 years that I would say degraded or had the program in decline, other than the fact that, there was always pressures over, funding and stuff like that. So, it would always be like, well, this year we got a whole spending. We can't increase spending on customer experience, or we need to cut it by a certain percentage. But outside of that, everything kind of hummed along for 10 years. I guess I was one of the lucky ones. But we hear so many stories about funding of programs, CX programs, especially in terms of them either declining or reducing or even eliminating some positions. which is a problem. But what specifically are you seeing or hearing that might be causing that to happen?
Great question. I mean, and like you just mentioned, I am having conversations with so many people who they're hurting because the companies understand that CX is important for their long-term success. And yet these teams are being reduced or eliminated altogether. So it's a very frightening time, and it's very real because it's a little bit of what we say and what we do conflict as an organization often. Certainly been there. And I think as we start exploring a little bit about what's going on, I think there's a couple of things. Number one, and not any particular order, and I will say I'm sharing this both from conversations and then my own experience, but conversations are focused on the past. So CX practitioners oftentimes show up talking about what happened last week, last month, last year. And when you do that, you aren't part of the solution. You're not part of what's coming in the future. You're not having a forward thinking, let's brainstorm and ideate and figure out what to do differently with the organization. So you're showing up with information that's not, oftentimes it's not driving, it's not the actionable insights, to use the common phrase we hear. It's not actionable, it's informative. So focusing on the past. I think another thing, and I know we belabor this point, but rather than saying it's failure to link to the financial performance, I would say it's more so even speaking an unfamiliar language. Our business leaders, they use words, they're talking about sales, they're talking about customer acquisition, they're talking about an operating expenses. And oftentimes a CX leader will show up with words like loyalty, satisfaction. And when you're talking to your executives, it's oftentimes hard for them to figure out what's the relationship with that. So the language isn't familiar. And it's not that they're not linked, because it's critically important that you demonstrate they are, and we know they are. However, you have to speak their language rather than expecting them to speak yours. And I think that early in my career, that was one that I would, like, I remember wanting to stand on my desk and stomp my feet and say, like, what's going on? You don't care about the customer? Like, why are you making these decisions? Why don't you care as much as I do? And I had to realize that they did care. They just didn't see their path forward and what they needed to do differently. And so that language around linkage and business impact is important. I think also oftentimes CX leaders show up with their own agenda, where they're looking at voice of the customer and they're saying, these are the most important things, but those things aren't necessarily aligned to the business strategy. And if you think about it big picture, usually when you're looking at voice of the customer data or signals, the number of customers that really experience a failure are pretty low. So in the whole scheme of things, when you're looking at all customers, they make up a very small percentage. So while we as CX or support leaders, it's 100% of our day, it might be a couple percent of the overall customer volume and revenue, and drive that much of the revenue. Therefore, you have to present it in a way that aligns it to business priorities and make sure you're showing up talking CX, talking about customers in a way that aligns to those most important things. And it's not necessarily starting with the back end friction or pain point drivers. And then the last thing I would say is you operate on an island. So you are like, support organizations tend to be the necessary evil. It's part of doing business, and they sort of set apart from everyone else. And I think as a CX professional or support leader, it's very important for you to understand, how do you actually show up and be collaborative and build those relationships so that you're bringing value to those strategic initiatives and the things that are most important to those key stakeholders. And we can break any of that down. But those are the things that I see are putting the business, a CX strategy at risk, because sum it up, it's not as relevant and it's not as clearly connected to business outcomes and goals.
And also there's a time element, I think, attached to that connection as well, because expectations around what the language of leadership is talking about, sales and revenues and profits, etc., has a urgency around it and a cause and effect. So what we do here today will cause something to happen in the future better. And we have these goals and objectives and we have targets to reach and stuff like that. Do you think that people who come from, let's say, originally, everybody gets into customer experience from different avenues, right? Different pathways and stuff. I mean, I came in through, I won't even go through that story, but I mean, I was a business person before I was a CX person, and I was a training and development person before I was a CX person. And a lot of those things have helped frame that for me. Do you think it's one of those things that the person who is the CX manager has an advantage or a disadvantage by not having been grounded in business principles before they got into the world of CX?
I think yes and no, right? I think that it depends on the individual, and I think it depends on are they curious? Are they recognizing where those gaps are, and are they pulling people into their environment that can bring that perspective and teach? I think that there's also an advantage of having a deep knowledge of a certain part of the business. But again, it's about recognizing what you don't know and making sure you are surrounding yourselves with that perspective and growing your own skill set to be smarter, more effective, more applicable to what's going on in the organization.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Well, I want to hit on something though that you said about the time factor. It kind of made me think of a story. So I think that is extremely important. I'm going to go back to using that comment in relation to the one I made earlier about focusing on the past. When I was working for a large bank, I hadn't been in the organization for very long, and we had all the cues, right? That CX was important. It was part of the corporate scorecard. Bonuses were driven off of it. It was the leading topic in executive meetings. Like all the right pieces were in place. However, what I noticed is I'd sit in a meeting and I would lead the so I was reporting in operations for the bank. So it was the COO's meeting, and I would report on CX every single week. First thing, again, because it's important. Well, what I noticed is that as I would talk about CX, again, I was looking in the back. So I was explaining why we had a blip in performance, why was there this spike, what was going on in the organization. And we were just spinning our wheels to explain away oftentimes normal variation, right? So it wasn't driving any really good conversation. And what I observed is the questions they asked were about that, explain what happened, but it wasn't causing them to do something different in the future. However, whenever the CFO presented and they were talking about the sales forecast, everybody in the room was talking, right? Lots of engagement. They were talking about how are we going to hit our number for this quarter? How are we going to hit our number for the end of the year? How are we tracking? And one of the things I noticed is, okay, this is sort of what drove some of the comments I made earlier, the lesson of I'm having the wrong conversation. Like they care about it, but they don't know what to do about it. My scorecard isn't familiar. The words aren't familiar. And so I came back to the team and I said, we need to figure out how to build a forecast. And I need it to look like, how in your finance meetings, you have like the traditional financial waterfall chart, and it'll have like performance, where we need to go, and maybe you have headwinds and tailwinds and the little blocks that show that chart. They loved that chart. They knew how to read that chart. It meant everything. And I said, okay, we've got to figure out how we can build and I want it to look exactly like that, but it's going to be NPS because that was the KPI that we used in the organization. So we did not have fancy, sophisticated tools. It was figure out what are the things that are driving the biggest pain that then result in detractors, because NPS is a math problem. So if I can get rid of detractors and move them to neutral, then I'm going to inherently improve my score. And that's what I needed to do. I mean, just that's the facts.
Yep.
So what we found is these were certain criteria and scenarios that customers became heavy detractors, and we could tie it to the cost of serving those customers. These particular situations. So an example, we changed their fee structure on their credit card or on their accounts. That was going to be heavy detractor. It was going to be a costly contact because they never contacted you once. There was multiple contacts involved. And what we ended up doing is then we figured out these are the scenarios that drive detraction. And then we went to our stakeholders across the organization to say, is there anything you're doing that in this next 3, 6, 9 months is going to impact fees? And what we found is there was a lot of stuff that was going to impact fees. And so we sort of t-shirt sized it, small impact, medium, large, based on the number of customers it was going to impact or would be affected by it. So the next time we go in and we've got a predictive model. So now we have a waterfall chart with headwinds and tailwinds, what was going to help NPS scores, what was going to detract. And here's where we're tracking to hit our number for the end of the year, which, hey, is tied to bonus and tied to OpEx. Because again, that's what the operations leaders needed to see. And it was this beautiful moment where suddenly the conversation becomes very engaged. The conversation, no more was I spinning my wheels with my analysts going back and trying to account for something, that blip that didn't matter. Now we're deciding, hey, what are the initiatives coming that maybe we need to do a better job of communicating to our customers about this change? Maybe we don't make the change, or maybe we handle it very differently. And I remember the very first time that we were about to transition to a new chat vendor. So the COO, again, this is normal business. He's talking to finance. They're making the decisions about this particular chat vendor that we already did business with. And before he made that decision, which would have been an easy yes, it was, wait, Michelle, let's run it through the model. How will this change impact our performance and cost? Well, what we found is that actually, while they may be cheaper per contact, they actually drove an increased contact rate, and they had lower satisfaction and NPS scores. So we chose not to give them that volume. And that was the moment where it was like, oh, this is how you can show up as a more valuable player to what the business is choosing to do next in the future, and shift from explaining the blips. And that was a very powerful aha moment in terms of credibility, influence, and impact.
Well, Michelle, I'm having an aha moment right now because I worked in the financial industry as well for a short period of time. And I don't think anything like that ever was shown or existed there. So I hope that the folks here that are listening to this webcast who are in the financial service or banking industry could take a lead from what you just said, Michelle, which I'm sure that model has adaptability to other businesses
100%.
as well. Yeah.
And having worked in tech and financial services and retail, I will tell you 100%. Everybody speaks that language. It works. It is transferable. And this just goes back into one of the key things I think you as a CX leader can do is build that relationship with your CFO or whoever, your counterpart in finance, because they'll love you for being able to do this because you're only helping them do their job and make the business more profitable.
Let me share with you just a very short little anecdote here. When I was working in that financial services industry, the then VP of customer experience shared a story with me about the CFO of the bank. Then CFO of the bank made reference to the VP of CX in this forum, said, I know so-and-so, he seems like a really nice person, but I haven't a clue what he does. And that was like a moment of reckoning for that VP of customer experience. Like, whoa, the
That's
CFO
why they get
doesn't have a
defunded,
clue.
right?
Yeah, that's that would be one of the early indications, right? If you will, probably one of the later indications, because this is like 7 or 8 years into the, and I hesitate to call CX a program, and I don't know how you feel about that. There's a lot of, because you don't talk about your marketing program or your sales program, because sometimes, programs have that connotation of they begin and end. Well, this doesn't end, right? CX does not end.
Okay, I love this comment. I would say that I think this, you said what, your question was what around what's driving maybe some of the defunding. I think you're raising another factor is we operate, businesses oftentimes manage their CX strategy as a program or a project. And I think that if you find that that's what's happening, then that would be a red flag, right? That is something that you've got to say, all right, it has to be a behavior. We are changing behaviors and how we operate, and that is a great indicator. And are you as a CX leader helping to influence and give them the right information and insight to influence those behaviors and decisions? And if you're not, it's kind of setting you up for a risk.
Yeah. All right, we've got some questions coming in here, and I had a whole list of them here, but I'm going to go to some of the ones that people on the call here have. Nancy asks, how to have better visibility into monitoring CX data to gauge impact of changes across channels and interfaces.
Awesome. Thanks, Nancy. And I would say you have a lot of technology like Question Pro that can capture those signals, right, to figure out what is actually happening in your organization. So there are so many places that you can get great data. There is a gold mine, and is if you are doing call recordings, as an example, and you're able to leverage the scripts from the contacts into customer support, that is like I said, that is a gold mine of insights, because customers are giving so much more about what's happening with their experience during those discussions than you're ever going to get in just a survey. Also, your social data, what's happening in ratings and reviews, what's happening on social media, what are customers saying about your brand? So just being able to cast a wide net and bring in those signals. I would also say I've had significant success of the examples I just gave. Those are all like something's happened and the customer has to tell you. So it's almost like I'm going to say customers, the detection source. So what if you don't want customers to be your detection source? A great place to look is digital behaviors. So are you building a relationship with your digital partners to say, what does their behavior look like online? Like our customers, are they abandoning while they're, shopping online? Are they bird nesting, going back and, what are they doing online that might be an indicator that could be an issue, or actually something's working really well? So being able to pull in all of that data and using technology. I mean, there's, again, lots of platforms that you can choose from that are able to analyze that data and let you know what's happening. Is it a different experience through channel? Is it a different experience based on issue type? But that is where I would go to source it. I'm going to actually turn it over probably to Question Pro to elaborate on that a little bit more. But before I'd say that, if you don't have the technology today, I tell you what, that example I gave with that waterfall chart in the financial services, literally, we did that with Excel. We looked at, it was the old school reading call logs, reading feedback, and let's hope you're not in that place anymore. But if you've got to MacGyver it and use bubble gum and baling wire, there is a way to do it. Just leverage some of the insights from analysts that are either within your organization or that are willing to give you some of their time and expertise to play around with that. But because this is about tools, I don't know, do you all, Carl, Question Pro, do you have something to add on that particular question?
Yeah, I can jump in there. Thanks, Michelle. I think the question, better visibility and monitoring of your CX data. I think everything you said there is spot on, and even down to the MacGyvering it bit, right? And I think the bit of the MacGyvering bit that I always take into thinking about how do we help people better monitor, have better visibility of stuff is, what do you actually want to look at? And work that out in advance, and then work out, right, is that best served by a touch point survey at this point of time? Is it best served by your web analytics saying where the drop off has come, or that sort of thing? So build your own picture of what it is you're trying to see, and then work out where you can get it from. And I think journey mapping at however many levels can get you a good sort of source of where do we listen on that front. So it's back to speaking the same language, knowing what you want, and then asking the right question at the right time, finding the right source of insight at the right time. And I think our tool allows you to plan for it, allows you to go and collect it, and then easily visualize it.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to comment here, but because we get so many questions coming in. But here's another one. Valisa asks, how can we strengthen our CX program with limited resources while empowering our teams to become self-sufficient?
Love it. So been there. I've been the team of one, and I've been the team of hundreds, right? So I feel your pain. I'm actually going to go back to something that Nick was just speaking about, and he's like, know what you want. So I would say, I'm going to say, who is the you? Is the you the CX leader? I would say if you're limited in terms of resources, the you should be the leader, the function, the group that is influencing the business the most. So as an example, I am going to, let me give a real life example. So I was in it with the company, and we were moving the loyalty program from a punch card to a digital card, right? So it was an online loyalty program. Well, who is you? I want to know that loyalty information, instead of looking at it from satisfaction, NPS, the CX leaders lens and their favorite KPIs, look at it from the loyalty team's eyes. So what is the data they need to know that is going to ensure that the loyalty program is successful and customers love using it? And take that as the compass to figure out what data, if you only have finite resources and finite time and finite tools, figure out, how do I make sure that what I'm bringing forward is the most important thing? So as a CX leader, maybe you come back to the loyalty team and you say, hey, your goal was you needed to get 20 million active users, and you needed them to, you wanted them to stick, right? You didn't want them to drop off, you needed them to stick. So I'm going to go to you as the loyalty program leader, and I'm going to say, hey, you're doing an awesome job on that loyalty program, because you are. And if we made this small change, then we could get X basis points improvement in you hitting your number in terms of active users. That is a much different conversation than here's how I tell you NPS or satisfaction, because that's going to tie directly to business priorities and financial and the most important financial metrics, as well as that strategic imperative.
And that's, Michelle, treating that internal loyalty team as the customer. That's an internal customer. And you're serving that internal customer.
100%.
Yeah.
But in turn, you're serving that external customer. And sometimes that lens, I have found, in all my couple of decades, I have found that the more I can make the initiative successful, then the more credibility I have and influence to help them be successful. And then the initiatives that I know are causing customer pain that may not be tied to some of those key strategic initiatives, I'm more likely to get the funding and support to go tweak those.
Mm. Okay, we have another question here. Sam is asking, based on your experience with brands like 7-Eleven, Citi, and Dell, what unique challenges did you face and how did you overcome them? I guess you could talk for the next hour about that.
So many. Well, so I've got a great story that I think will address how do you build alliances, how do you influence cross functionally, and we're gonna talk nacho cheese because nacho cheese is good. So with it, obviously, I'm talking about an experience with 7-Eleven. So 7-Eleven puts a lot of care into doing testing of product, right, before they go into market. So there was an initiative where there was, we're going to change the nacho cheese profile. Well, the CX team, so I ran CX and I ran customer service for Canada and the US. So large organization dealt with all the things that went wrong on the back end, right? And influencing strategy. Well, for example, this product team, we didn't know that they were changing the flavor profile. And all of a sudden we start getting some feedback around the nacho cheese. Well, it wasn't a lot of feedback, but it was statistically significant. It was showing up when normally no one was talking about nacho cheese. So the team goes to the product group and they're like, hey, we're getting some feedback on this nacho cheese. And so they're like, well, we did all of our testing. We feel really good about it, but this is kind of curious. Let's work together. So now with this product team, we're starting to develop a relationship where we're just like, we're not coming them, attacking them. We're not calling their baby ugly, which is another problem. Sometimes CX pros do. We're coming with like valuable information to help them be more successful. Well, come to find out, they were, it was a slow roll for across the country, and where they started had not had a significant testing. And the customers that were buying it, they didn't like it, and they had a point of view on it. So the product team actually put a hold on the deployment. They went back and did further testing. And after further testing across a broader test group, they decided not to roll out that cheese because we actually would have lost money. So think about that story in regards to we were a valuable player and ally to the product team. That was a relationship we had not had in the past. They are able to share some really big wins because, right, they didn't see decline in sales. They didn't have, issues from our franchisees talking about, hey, we're getting a lot of complaints. Because the complaint volume, if you were only looking at that KPI, it wasn't going to be high. But it was significant in terms of driving revenue, driving visits from customers because this was a good seller. So it was just a total win in how we started operating and doing business with other stakeholders. And a point I would make to a CX leader, when you have a story like that, where you have now built you have a new champion, ask that champion to tell their friends. Because stakeholders trust their peers more than they trust you as a CX leader. So the nacho cheese product leader can go talk to the pizza product leader or the coffee product leader and say, hey, we got some really interesting insight that prevented us from having a lot of negative impact on the back end by working with this team. And that's how you position yourself to be a value player around strategy instead of being the one they call after something's already done and say, oh yeah, can you give me a report on what customers are saying about X?
You know what that reminds me of, Michelle, is we had Mark Slayton as a prior guest on the CXBS about becoming a trusted guide. And that's exactly what you're describing there, is becoming a trusted guide internally in the organization. That's really a great story. Thanks for sharing that. We have another question here from Mark Michelson coming in. He asked, Michelle, you've worked across a variety of industries in CX, often at the very beginning of setting up a CX program. Which industries do you find more challenging and why? That's one question. What are 3 things that are common across all industries that you've worked? And that's second question.
So what was, and hey, Mark, I'm glad to see you. So what industry is more challenging? I don't know that it was different because of the industry. I think it was more challenging based on how embedded and the maturity of customer centricity was within the organization. Because sometimes if it is inherently, I mean, look, I was at Dell, I was at Dell selling computers when companies were buying their very first computers. So totally date myself. It was customer was so who we were. And so it was easy to get support and buy-in to do things just because it made sense for customer. And so that was 16 years there. I'm very grateful for the time I spent there because it was just a cool experience. Whereas then you move into like financial services or retail. With financial services, it was very much embedded. But there were pockets on, like I gave you the example earlier, like this is really important to us, but I don't know how to use it in a way that influences future behaviors. So I think it's finding a way and investing the time to be a voice of influence and credibility to get the organization to do something in a different way than maybe they had done previously. But once you do, and once you get those champions and allies, then you will accelerate your impact. And I could say the same thing with 7-Eleven, same thing. Already in place, voice of the customer was already part of how business worked, voice of franchisee. But once you could break through with how the operations or the store behaved, the organization behaved, then you could really drive a lot of influence. And I would say that your second question, Mark, was what are the common across all the industries? It's all the same stuff, right? It is, how do we influence change? How do we listen more effectively to what customers are saying? How do we drive actionable insights and influence behaviors? And how do we prove it?
Yeah. Hope that answers your question, Mark. One thing I wanted, I think, Nick, you had some question, I think came earlier here. He wanted to add something to what you was talked about earlier.
Yeah, it was, thanks, Carl. It's just on the sort of, getting other people to help them help you, really, when you're dealing with the other departments. One of the things I found with a Voice of the Customer program that I ran in Spain for Sky was we ended up building dashboards from call center transcripts, all sorts of insight. But we built a search functionality into it. So I could go to our head of e-commerce and I could say, what do you want to know that our customers are saying about stuff that's important to you? And they would come up with something that I'd never thought of, put it in the search bar, we'd show them across the customer journey where that phrase or that topic was coming up, the sentiment, the emotion, etc., that was alongside it. And that sort of tech is widely available now. And that piece of sort of collaboratively building out what it is that your peers in different parts of the organization want to know then helps you bring more value back to them, which then makes them want to work with you more. And it's this beautiful virtuous cycle of we're all in this together, whereas sometimes it can very much feel like here I go again on my own if you aren't getting that collaboration across the different departments. So just wanted to add that to the end of that conversation.
I think it's awesome because you're talking about that personalization based on the user and the business function that they have responsibility for. And on that, like you said, technology that exists today, what I think is so fascinating is I'm a firm believer that the more you can give the customer the microphone to say whatever they want to say versus these very, so maybe it's a text box, maybe it's a video where you just let loose and let them say what they need to say. And then you use the capability, like you were just speaking to, Nick, of being able to search and listen to everything they say, rather than saying, hey, we had to have, X percentage of our customers mention this word to actually get anyone's attention. You eliminate that threshold. And now it may just be one customer that says something really insightful that helps to explain why a change needs to happen. To give another 7-Eleven example on that, just the power of one voice, we had launched new coffee machine, specialty coffee machines. I'll kind of cut to the chase, but we were getting complaints about the coffee, and we couldn't really figure out what was going on. One customer takes a video of them doing an iced coffee in these new, very expensive machines that had been deployed across the organization. But one customer shows himself getting a coffee. And what was happening is they were putting the ice in first because that's what it said to do. The ice was going in first. The coffee was coming in hot. It was melting all the ice. So now you had a lukewarm, watered down coffee that was overflowing in the cup. So the company was like, do we need to trade out these machines? Is it a problem with the machine? It was a setting problem. It was a setting problem. Now, did I have to have 70,000 customers complaining about the coffee? No, I had to have one video that explained it, corrected like that, no problem. And I think that's where, again, how you use giving them the mic, as I call it, and let them tell you what you need to know, what they think you need to know, instead of you as the brand saying, I'm going to ask you the questions that I need to know. It is such a powerful shift that can, you just will be shocked at how much you can learn about your business.
I'm chuckling, Michelle, because I grew up in the world of chemistry, and if that person that you observed had been a chemist, they would have known how to put the ice in first.
Well, it's that user behavior, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We're really getting down to time here, but I want to kind of ask one final question here. If you had to boil down, because we talked about this, building resilience into our program, what 3 things would you say that CX managers should be part of this? Or 3 things, boil it down to 3 things that should be sure that they include this in their programs. What would that be?
Well, I would say kind of fail-proof things that I found is, number 1, start out kind of like an investigative journalist. Go out and really talk to all of the stakeholders, all of the leaders of all the departments, not the ones you normally work with, but IT, finance, marketing, logistics, all of these folks. And really don't go there to pitch CX. Don't go there for any purpose other than, what are the most important things for you? What are you worried about? What are your strategic priorities? Let me understand the roadmap. Like, be curious and take all of that information, listen, ask questions, because once you've compiled all of that, now you begin to understand, where is the best place for me to play? And that kind of goes back on the question earlier of, if I'm limited with resources and time, you start to get an idea of much bigger picture of the organization and what's most important to them. And where you also can learn from that is, who is my best ally to start working with and deliver results right now? So that's one. The second one is, and I kind of mentioned this before, is once you win with that one person, ask them to help be a champion for you and help get them to go to some meetings with key stakeholders to say, hey, Michelle helped me with this particular program. Let me tell you what it meant to my business. Let's see if maybe what she can do and her team can do for you. So dig into that, because that is how you slowly start to influence and change culture and the way work gets done and build credibility. And then the third thing I'd say is, earlier, like I mentioned too, the words and methods you use, show up to the conversation, bring information to them in the way they know how to interpret, the way they look at things, instead of how you want to present it. And if you kind of start with those and meet them where they are and help them be successful, then you can slowly start to sprinkle in some shifts in language and shifts in approaches. But that will save you a lot of churn, time, frustration, is being able to show up in the way that is going to more quickly lead you to a successful result.
Well, thank you, Michelle. I think we could probably keep this going for an additional hour, but we don't have that latitude, unfortunately. So we're at time here, but thank you so much for being my guest here today on CXBS. And for those of you who are regulars, please join us next month. It'll be Tuesday, June 18th, as I look at my calendar here, at this same time. And my guest speaker then will be Alex Mead, who will talk about the customer service experience in terms of what's happening and perhaps what's not happening, and how to turn that around and make it happen. So I hope to see you all next time. Thank you all. And thank you, Paulina, Nick, and Michelle, and everyone who joined in today. Thanks again. See you next month.
Thank you. We can't hear you, Paulina.
Thank you. It happens to anyone. So yes, thank you. So if anyone has any suggestions or commentary on how to improve our shows, please let us know. You can just scan the QR code there on screen. And yes. So thank you. See you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.